Um, but first, I wanted to say welcome to our webinar on cybersecurity and supply management. Thank you all for being here. I would like to first introduce our speakers for today. We have Jim Fleming. He is a program manager and faculty member at the Institute of Supply Management. He is a certified But first, I wanted to say welcome to our webinar on cybersecurity and supply management. Thank you all for being here. I would like to first introduce our speakers for today. We have Jim Fleming. He is a program manager and faculty member at the Institute of Supply Management. He is a certified professional in supply management, a certified professional in supplier diversity, and he has spent over 30 years working in engineering and supply management senior roles for the Intel Corporation. He retired from Intel in 2014 and pursued his passion for education by joining ISM. We also have Charlotte de Brabandt. She is a world-renowned speaker working together with highly motivated individuals to help them thrive in this new digital world as well as master their mind. Within the past year, she's spoken at 2 TEDx events, been featured in NBC, Fox, CNBC, Forbes, and multiple international events with up to 80,000 people and multiple Fortune 500 companies. Charlotte is a technologist, and she's also a member of our Harvard and Tech board. She is a negotiation keynote speaker and host with ample global industry experience in the field of automotive, timepieces technology, pharma, consumer goods, and medical devices. So with that, I wanted to welcome Charlotte and Jim. Thank you for both joining us, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having us. We are very humbled, and it's a great honor speaking to you today during this webinar. So, as supply management continues to take a strategic direction within corporations, one of the things which we need to continue to observe is how are all these systems working together. So one of the things that's often referred to when it comes to this discussion is what is a supply management ecosystem? This is a way to step back and look at the entire network, which is kind of embraced within supply management. It takes a look at your different organizations internally and externally. It looks at the people that are truly involved, such as internal stakeholders within your organizations, within the supply base, and also possibly within the community or within the government. So think about the activities, what kind of information needs to flow, and all of the different resources that are required in order to truly take a good in the service and get it from the supplier to the customer. One of the things that continues to emerge with Industry 4.0 is the ecosystem evolution into technological interdependency. We are seeing complex systems being implemented. We are seeing technology actually piloting or being piloted in various segments, discovering extremely powerful results and then being proliferated across entire ecosystems. So not only within a single corporation, but actually entire industries are starting to adopt one of these.
So that brings us into the supply chain. And all of a sudden, we're kind of in this state of crises. And relative to the cybersecurity, the ecosystem, the world has actually been turned upside down. With COVID-19, we have seen in the supply chain itself, there's approximately 450 million people in that network within the global perspective. And if we stop and think about that, this isn't the end state customer. This is the individuals that provide goods and services, the individuals that provide the suppliers and the suppliers, down to second, third, fourth tier. We look at everybody that's in the logistics, the warehousing, the transportation. All of these folks have been affected in some form or fashion. We can take a look at COVID-19. In 3 months, we have had the top 20 economies in the world of the G20 that are now forecasting to actually go into a recession this coming year. Now, that is a significant shift because those same 20 were all forecasting to have a growth throughout the same period of 2020. So there's been a significant shift. And on average, there has been, if you take a look at the suppliers, the ones that are operating, factories are only operating at about 50% of the capacity. So there's been all kinds of significant impact that has led into the world being vulnerable to what's going on. And what's happening, unfortunately, is that the criminal sector is tapping into that anxiety and that fear. So people are working from home. Suppliers that were at one time available are no longer available. And so we have to find new suppliers. And over half of the cybersecurity breaches within any corporation are dealt with connections or non-secure connections with suppliers. Cyber incidents. If you were to take a look at the growth rate, most companies take a look at, when they think about risk management, they look at what are the normal or reoccurring themes that continue to emerge. And there's a number of different sites out there that'll provide, kind of a supply market analysis. This particular one happens to come from Alliance, and I really like working with this particular site. Each year they give a snapshot of sectors and the incidents that they're most prone to. And they'll put out the top 10 or the top 20 risk factors. Cyber incidents have grown year over year for the past 5 years. And even prior to the COVID-19, this past year, cyber incidents have become the number one risk factor for business and also supply management. So, that it really goes to show is the cyber incidents didn't occur just because of COVID. People know because of the ecosystem, the way Charlotte was just talking, we are very interconnected. We are very interdependent on technology, and we will continue to see people looking for the weak links in the system. So we have to create risk mitigation strategies that are really going to take this into account. COVID-19, a couple things that have recently occurred, and a lot of people are doing research around what's happening. And what we're finding is people are going through and receiving phishing emails at about 700% increase in just the last few months. And I know I can open my email on any given day, and there's somebody that's ready to send me the link for the answers to everything if I'd only click on it. And, I have money just sitting elsewhere. I have suppliers that are willing to, pay me millions of dollars for my knowledge. And all they want me to do is just click on that one link. And that's unfortunately some of the easiest ways that they get into your network and start to create all kinds of havoc. The World Health Organization, while they continue to be present to help the world through this pandemic, they're stating that they're seeing the amount of cybersecurity incidents have doubled in just the last couple of months, where people are trying to represent themselves as a member of the World Health Organization, and they're sending out emails. So people that are looking for solutions are being asked to click onto these bogus links. And then we start to see where ransomware, and Charlotte will talk to a little bit more around what this is, but already we've seen where people are tapping into networks, and in this case into Illinois with the public health sector, and starting to hold information at ransom. And it impacted 200,000 people that were trying to figure out, how do I navigate this COVID-19 at a very in a timely fashion when it was just breaking out, and all of a sudden now 200,000 people are being held at bay with lack of information. So impact, if we were just to take a look at what occurs in a given year, you start to see that not only are cyber incidents continuing to grow, but the cost associated behind it is astronomical. On average, we see about cost that companies have to incur about $3.9 million to take care of any kind of cyber breach, clean up, and actually get closure on this thing. 2019, the Equifax, this one reached a settlement of $700 million. So the original settlement that they were trying to go with was in the billions. And you can see that just something as simple as tapping into a network and getting into people's personal information and financial information becomes significant. Cost for cyber crimes, expecting to hit $6 trillion, and going after the companies that are most vulnerable, and these are the small and mid-sized businesses. And stop and think about, in the last couple of months, what has happened to the small and mid-sized companies. They've had their world rocked. And so this data set actually came out prior to the COVID-19. And social engineering, the criminals are becoming extremely sophisticated in the way that they're reaching out to help individuals believe that this is a credible resource. And the FBI is talking about worldwide losses in the $26 billion since 2016. So significant financial impact, significant impact to each and every one of us that have been, tapped into that world of cyber criminal.
Thank you, Jim. And when we start looking at cyber incidents across entire companies and supply chain, basically there are three main causes of cyber incidents. Organizations that come from the outside are able to get inside of your data set and breach your security that gives access to personal information such as social security number, credit card information, banking infrastructure, stock portfolio, or really other things that continue to impact. Second one, espionage. Really taking a look at the ransomware attack, which were very sophisticated individuals, and they were able to infiltrate networks and hold your data hostage or prevent you from being able to get inside of your service that you were supposed to have access to. You will see in a minute an example, but people are really able to do this nowadays. They hold data and they ask you to pay back. So you can get your own data back. Or also mistakes by employees. We will show an example where I will talk about mechanisms you can put in place that will truly minimize any of these attacks from occurring in the future. So let's talk about Target. That was the 2013 timeframe. And the Target Corporation had a big breach. You may have read about it in the news, you may remember, but let's really find out what caused it and what are the lessons learned. Well, a couple of things. It's anticipated that 40 million customer credit cards got impacted. So the breach really got into the Target Corporation system. And it looked at individual information that can be utilized, that can be used for wrong things going forward. So this malware, it was used and introduced truly at the point of sale, where it affected around 1,800 different stores globally, and it went into a very large growth very quickly. So the single point, it affected global Target operations, Target stores, and the criminals. They actually managed to gain access into the Target network through a third party, also known as an HVAC, so some sort of service provider specializing on heating, ventilation, or air conditioning. And sometimes the suppliers which we have in place, they don't really have such sophisticated cybersecurity in place. So around 61 million was spent to respond to that breach and to settle it, to eliminate the impact and truly pay back the customers in order to do some sort of brand reputation. So here is a supplier that caused the problem for an entire corporation. So when it hits home, we need to see how it may impact our community and surroundings. So always be cautious what you're doing. Another example, one of my favorites, the ransomware. A few years back, there was a ransomware that was called the WannaCry. I'm sure you've heard of it. It was all over the news. And the ransomware is truly a malicious software designed to block access to computer systems. So if you go into your research, what's really interesting about these, you will start to see how these viruses or infiltrations are having code names. It's a name that shows up on your screen, or it's or it gets tracked through an agency that's being investigated, and there is some random name. What was the impact? So we had around 1 million computers in 150 countries that got impacted just within hours. And they went and they really started to look at some target audiences. So these were big corporations, organizations that were truly impacted at the beginning. Inside the company, the data was put on a freeze and the employee couldn't access it anymore. And you had to pay to gain access back to your own data. So in Europe, for example, there was Renault or Nissan, the automotive manufacturing plants, they had to completely shut down. And we started to see that equipment, they started to have big problems. So sensors or alarms, they were just turned off. In Britain, we had hospitals starting to shut down. In China, gas stations got affected and stopped working. So sometimes you need to ask yourselves, do they only attack one certain industry? But in this case, they took it all. And in Russia, for example, banks got impacted. So this had a truly global impact and it went quite mainstream. So they found out in order to get the information back, they had to pay via a Bitcoin payment to release their own data. And it was really difficult to trace back. And there was a damage of around $4 billion US. And the way it could have been prevented, a very simple Microsoft update. But several companies, they delayed these updates and they had some older versions of the software in their systems, in their computers. So updating your software is so crucial and it can often mitigate such a drastic risk. What is the risk by holding back an old software? So that shows you if there's an update, instead of not being bothered or delaying, just press update. And one more example. Mistakes by employees. Here's some interesting facts. So you see that 62% of employees, they use their work computers to access social media accounts, which lead to more vulnerability, and 90% of cloud-based breaches happen actually within social engineering. They are reaching out and they make you believe it's legit and you give your personal information. So altogether, they had around 23.2 million globally breached accounts. If you do the research, you can see that the most common password in the world currently is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So criminals, they try out the simple combination. So they reach out, they try out the password, and with IoT, we bring new ways of accessing the networks which they desire. And they see this, and they see that this password is not really being access to your account just using the wireless. So another fact, 130 million of global phishing attacks, what Jim just pointed out. And they were 130 million just in 3 months in 2019. Employees, they clicked on a link and they didn't really know where it came from until they realized and it was just too late. And then last one, here 75% of small medium business leaders have found that they have not really activated their multi-factor authentication. So you have these systems that need to have protection in place. It's very easy to do so, but you may just be delaying all of these extra protections that the computer, the devices, or the systems, they may be offering to you. So we can see that the UN puts together and kind of tracks what is the impact of cyber crimes across the world and the countries. And we source to see different laws truly emerging across different countries to protect individuals or enterprises or organizations from being more inclined for cyber attacks. The United Nations, they monitor global cyber laws and e-commerce legislations. And there are truly 4 areas of legislations which are currently in place. Firstly, we have the e-transaction laws. Secondly, we have the data protection privacy law. So I'm sure many of you have read over the past 2 years the big GDPR, which got implemented in Europe very drastically and coming to the US. Then we have the cybercrime laws. And fourthly, the consumer protection laws. So this is what you can see in the map. And it points out the 4 different types of legislations which are showing being related to each region in the world, which are covering different amount of legislations. So for example, the dark blue, it actively involves all of the legislations. You can see the countries which are really aware. Then you have light blue. They cover at least 3 different areas of legislations. Then the brown color covers 2 areas. And then we have the red maroon covering at least 1 area. And having legislations is one thing, but getting it enforced is another. So we all need to think about it. We see these laws being implemented, but breaches are still occurring. So these legislations, they will not completely eliminate what we have going on, but they will truly raise awareness for our communities, for our organizations, for our governments, and they will raise awareness of how we can take control, how we can help countries and manage these situations going forward. So here are some of the supply chain risks which we need to take into consideration. Every time we think that we have a service that we are working on with our suppliers or a third party that is involved, there is always a connection back into our system. So every time we outsource anything, there is always a connection back into our systems. And these providers have access from a virtual standpoint or even a physical standpoint to our different information systems, our data, or our software IP address, which increases the risk. So if you look at entire ecosystems and all of the different touch points we have, we need to comprehend the magnitude of this challenge and resource accordingly. Second thing, we see a lot of poor security practices and companies that are truly in the low tier suppliers. Loads of suppliers, they don't have the funding to put a security implication truly into place. So it's nobody's fault, but the lower we get into the supply chain and also the better deals we get. So if we look at the cheapest products or the cheapest service, the higher potentially the risk that there may be some unattended consequences. And we think we're getting a good deal, but we must be aware of what kind of cybersecurity systems, networks do they have in place. And that sometimes truly being forgotten while making a decision. So the total cost of ownership is taking on a new dimension that we need to take into account. And what's the total impact in case of cybercrime that may occur? Third, software security vulnerabilities. An example we see in each tier where we only need an update, for example, to prevent this big cybercrime, what we heard in the previous example. And things like this, where we constantly see the system being developed, but we need to stay on top and keep on updating our systems. Criminals are looking for the weak points and how they can then penetrate. Then the other one is the whole counterfeit hardware, a big topic. Research shows that 1 in 2 suppliers are dealing with counterfeit risks. So you get a hardware that is embedded in a malware or a backdoor, which is open. And the backdoors are being engineered into the system to get information, for example, from the government information or even sensitive information. Loads of factors which we need to make sure that we understand. Different hardwares have backdoors also in case they break down, then the company, they can go in and fix it. But this backdoor, it is an opportunity for cyber threats.
A lot of companies are trying to understand, I know cybersecurity is out there. What do I do about it? Some companies are very sophisticated. They are dealing with their own internal framework to try to keep ahead of the game. But what we're really trying to do here is just demonstrate there are some standards that if you have to go try to implement something, they are available that will kind of give you a guidance as going forward. So within the United States, there is a framework that was put together by the National Institute of Standard and Technology. And this was a mandate from the U.S. government to come up with a framework that is going to be instituted across all governmental entities within the U.S. But then the organization went forward one step further and said, we encourage businesses to utilize this same framework. And it just gives the opportunity to kind of put things in perspective, understand systems, understand implications, and the opportunity for us to at least start with their information and guidance allows us to create stronger systems internally. The other one, from a global standpoint, you would see an information security management system that has actually been forwarded and put together by the ISO IEC, and it's often referred to as the 27000 series. So most of us have dealt with the ISO certifications, and this one kind of gets into allowing you to have a similar framework that is looking at just your cybersecurity. The IEC is the Institute for Electrotechnical Commission, and they've partnered to allow themselves to kind of help global corporations and global government entities to come up with similar framework. And then you may see industry-specific framework. If you were to go out and just Google what are a different framework, here's one that is aligned to the electric network within the United States or North America. So there isn't a right framework, but there is a great framework to help you start having deeper conversations within your own organization. So let's take a look at the NIST framework. And the nice thing about these, they're relatively straightforward. They enable conversations within your organization to ensure whatever risk management structure you're putting in place has a total systemic approach. And so in this case, the first thing it allows you to do is it asks the question, do I have an executive level and an organizationally driven risk management process? We look to ensure that it's aligned to any kind of, guidance or governance within the organization, and tries to align to missions, understand what's the risk appetite, and is there budgetary items that are going to be available. It drives down into systems thinking, into the business and process level, really understanding critical infrastructure, and then it monitors changes or any kind of risks that I have currently or going into the future. If I implement some kind of change, does it make a difference? On the bottom half, it allows you to kind of dive down into the mechanics of the cyber environment or the ecosystem. So I'm connecting to the risk management process, but now I'm diving down a little bit deeper. I look at individual items within the profile of my ecosystem. I start understanding the business processes, the operational level, edicts that I have on, do I put software protection in place? Do I have guidelines that people have to follow, training that they must go through? And that leads into, on the left-hand side, making sure that I track the progress of what I put in place. So the framework itself just allows you to look at your entire organization and say, my initiatives in the cybersecurity are aligned and coordinated with my executive champions. And so it becomes kind of a reinforcing mechanisms that will help you keep things alive. Within the framework, it just goes through and it creates checklists. And there are 5 main functions that it wants you to talk to and think about. Identifying. Once you've identified a category, what is the means that you go through to protect? How do you detect if something has actually gotten through? What do you do to respond? And responding is not just having a software program. This is about, how do you have teams? How do you have individuals that communicate not only internally, but think about if you've had breaches that go to your customer base in the target situation. What did they have to do to respond to the 40 million credit card holders that were out there? And then you get into the recovery. So the processes are really straightforward. And if you've ever gone through any kind of a certification program, you're able to kind of tailor these to meet your needs. And it's not a cookbook where you have to do absolutely every single one of them, but you have to figure out which ones work for you. So that's the nice thing about this particular one. And it can be applied in a global environment. It doesn't contradict anything that's within the ISO or any others. It actually complements them quite nicely. Here's an example of the management system that exists from the ISO world. The benefits are started to be listed here, right? We reduce risk by having an overarching system that looks at it. We build trust within our businesses. We understand if there are regulations, how do we make sure that we're complying with them? How do we make sure that we inform individuals that the mistakes can be made and we try to reduce the likelihood that they're going to have them occur? So many benefits, and I think, these are kind of the proactive elements that we can talk with our management organizations to try to go forward and justify that we need to put some things in place that are going to prevent the cybersecurity. And it doesn't have to be just going out and finding the most technically competent organization in the world. These are simple things that we can all do. In this particular 27,000 framework, it looks at, again, kind of your entire ecosystem, thinking about your policies that you've established within your organization. So going back and thinking to the NIST, making sure, one of the first things they did there was align to any kind of executive champions and policies and business processes. This does very much the same thing. It has you think about all of your assets and how you manage those. And assets are software as a solution, we have handheld tablets, we have computer networks, we have sensors, all of these things we need to at least be aware of. That leads into the next part. What's the security mechanisms that we have? How do you make sure that if you have you've implemented Internet of Things and you put up a lot of sensors out there and cameras, just set up a password. Get out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is simple. We don't have to have, rocket science to do these kind of things. Understand, how do we access and control? How do we have an incident management system? And most companies understand incident management systems in, if you have some kind of safety issue. This isn't really any different. It's just about, if there's a cybersecurity breach, what do we need to do to kind of gain control? And then the last one, you put training systems in place. How do you make sure that people are honoring them? They're complying. And companies, that I've been working with, and in our company, we have an annual training program that we have to go through. And it's amazing how straightforward that is to basically, spend 60 minutes, go through and learn what are the new ways that they're trying to get into our environment. And compliance can come from just you can check, through a checklist or track that people have actually accessed it. So again, it's just kind of a holistic approach to create, assess, and manage the cybersecurity risk.
So other best practices that are really emerging, one of the things that previous examples hit on, understanding what procedures are in place within your organization and the type of security that you have in place in your organization. So past companies have some type of security in place. Normally in the cyber world, usually it's very much in collaboration with IT. So if we go to our suppliers, we need to see what truly their security standpoint is. So reviewing internal and external security procedures is crucial. Organizations, they should not only review their own internal infrastructure, but also the one from the vendors or the partners. While internal systems might have strong security practices for direct attacks, third-party collaborators might not adhere to the same practices, and consequently businesses need to go through vetting the vendors before fully integrating them into their own infrastructures. And also, as Jim just pointed out, training and sharing security best practices with staff, with vendors. While technology is essential nowadays, human error is still the primary source of data breaches. The recent Cybersecurity Intelligence Index report by IBM, it revealed that 95% of all of the security incidents involve human errors, from just following some links in some phishing scams, or by visiting bad websites, or by accident enabling viruses, and they truly become full victim by their threats. So looking at the suppliers' standards with this security comes also our security. And we need to work in this truly together as a partnership. It's important to close off the weak points in the system. So understanding your supply chain just becomes crucial. Do a supply network analysis, and its function will then need to understand who are your suppliers, who are your first tier, second tier, third tier suppliers, and how much information can you work with? How much risk can you take, and how detailed is their analysis? Look at your integrated business processes touch points and see where the certain interfaces may be. When you're using a logistics storage transportation company, for example, like DHL, UPS, FedEx, any of these global transportation companies, how good are their systems set up? How can you can make certain supplier recommendations and you can understand the whole supply chain, but you need to understand the sort of technology communication interfaces that and whether they're keeping them up to date. And then lastly, we continue to see technology becoming part of a solution. Not a problem, but a solution. So within artificial intelligence and deep learning, a number of efforts are going on to understand these patterns. They need to understand what is the routine and what is not. The new normal and understand what is not the new normal. And we need to look at behavioral analytics, understanding how data is being transferred between the different networks and what is considered to be a good system and a poor system. So deep learning is being used to analyze data such as logs, transaction, real-time communications to detect threats or unwarranted activities. And then we have blockchain cybersecurity. Every member in a blockchain is responsible for verifying the authenticity of the data which has been added. Therefore, the use of blockchain with artificial intelligence can establish a robust verification system to keep potential cyber threats away. So now as a summary, we really, as a strategic management organization, we need to think about how do we look at the entire ecosystem, and then we need to understand the technology that's really involved and where we are prone to risk and take responsibility accordingly. It's now about having risk management in place. Cybersecurity is one of the big areas which we still need to even more familiarize ourselves with. We need to be updated. We need to look at standards, organizations that can help you move through this quickly. So be open for a two-way dialogue to understand what are the suppliers, what are the customers or the partners doing out there. So don't assume that you may know it all or that you're fully equipped. Understand what's out there, and that will truly make the difference. So with this, I would like to thank you all for your time. We have a huge potential to make a difference around the world. And like this, we can see what's possible with an enterprise and with an organization. Thank you to Harvard and Tech for having us today, for having us present. And now I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Charlotte and Jim. Wanting to open it up. Of course, thanks. Wanting to open it up to all of you in case you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. And then if not, we also have some questions that people sent in we could cover as well.
Okay, so I received a question, for example. Jim, how about I will ask you?
Okay.
One question that came in, do you believe technology is the answer to solve cybersecurity problems?
Very good question. So technology is coming at us whether we like it or not. And, companies we've looked at supply management, business processes in the kind of supply management vision 2030 within ISM. We're finding about 80% of every business process that utilizes individuals today will no longer need to utilize human beings. So what we're going to be finding is that technology is getting more robust. But as long as we have human beings with the degree of, not understanding maybe the subtle things that they're doing and the impact that it can make, we're going to have something that is, it's just not fail-safe. Now, technology will get more sophisticated. You can see some of the deep learning. They're looking for behavioral shifts in the patterns of data coming in. So they're going to continue to see that. But Also, cyber criminals are that much smarter. And as long as we have the need to have human beings somewhere in the supply chain and technology that has people that want to penetrate it, we're going to have to stay on our guard. So every step forward, we potentially have an opportunity to take a half step back because of something. So that's kind of the most successful companies are the ones that never rest on your laurels. I worked 30 years for a company that their motto was only the paranoid survived. And every day we lived with that mindset. You had to be thinking forward. You had to be thinking about what can be going wrong, and you had to come up with new solutions. And I truly believe that that is going to have to continue to exist. Technology isn't going to eliminate everything. So we have to still have very smart people, and we have to have very aware people.
I love your answer, Jim. It truly hits the point. And I agree with you. And just to add on, I think it will definitely help us eliminate. It will not get rid of the cybersecurity problems, but at least it will help us increase our awareness. And most importantly, I think it will help us in exchanging that true dialogue of lessons learned and how we can help each other. And not only looking at your own organization and your own security, but making sure that all the partners you collaborate with, that they are also up to the latest updated standards. And I saw another question coming in. I will just read it out. So I did not realize how many issues occurred from employees getting into their personal accounts. Will we see an elimination of businesses allowing employees to use personal accounts?
That's an interesting one. And I think, we are seeing the social network going forward just continues to become more integrated in the way we do business. So think about the COVID-19. All of a sudden, we're now having to have this contact network tracking. And these things are coming from our smartphones. They're coming from mechanisms that are becoming part of our life. And you're seeing more businesses that are leveraging social networks and personal accounts in order to become more informed, more integrated. And so I don't think we're going to ever completely eliminate it. I do think we have to be, again, smarter. We have to be informed, and we have to take some kind of actions. You talked about the one statistic that 75% of the companies had leadership that said, I have the ability to create, network authentication, but I just didn't take the time to get it turned on. I didn't drive my suppliers to go do it because it seems simple and it seemed kind of like a waste. We're really busy. Oh my God, now I have to pay $61 million. Well, it's unfortunate. So I don't see it going away. I honestly see our workforce that if you told the millennials and the Gen X's and the Gen Z's that you can no longer have social networking capability, you're going to see them leaving companies. And talent management continues to be a big issue with a lot of companies. So we have to be open and explore what are the ways that we can optimize the solution.
And that's exactly the key word. How can we optimize? Because I think we need to definitely be thought leaders, looking after our generations, next generations, future talents which are out there. And if we completely eliminate, I don't think many will want to stay at the company. So definitely, I think finding some sort of solution and as you pointed out correctly, by even raising awareness and having the organization just educate employees, educate them that there are these phishing mails, there are these scams, they cannot eliminate all of them. So at least being aware of what you open, the source that you open that email from, have you heard of them before? Is it familiar? So I think it has a lot to do with education and helping the employees understand the consequences, and we're just truly out there. I think we have time for one or two more questions. So We got another question. How can we ensure the learnings from COVID-19 will be remembered for the next big crisis?
That's a great one. And every crisis that has occurred in the past, that has been one of the key questions that has come up. So some folks that have been in supply management can recall back into the Japanese earthquake, 2011. And that earthquake created a tsunami that created a nuclear meltdown. We can think about the financial crisis and the meltdown and suppliers that went bankrupt. Companies today that are learning and creating mechanisms that value organizational learning are the ones that are going to survive. The ones that choose to say, I'm going to deal with this today, and then I'm going to move back into my old-fashioned way of doing business and forget about it, chances are they're not going to be around. And so I think the successful companies will grasp this and again, kind of, Charlotte, I love the term where you kind of, it's into that proactive leadership. They grab it, they nurture it, and they learn from it, and they adapt their business profiles and their culture to always have it in front of them. And I think that's going to be key, that the successful companies of the future will be the ones that changed and adapted from the current pandemic and any current crises that we're dealing with. So there's a quote out there that talks about never waste a good crisis. And honestly, as painful as COVID-19 is, we are learning so much around how to do business differently. And so we have to tap into this and make sure that we can move forward.
Fantastic. I see so many questions popping up. Let's take another question from the panel that just came in, and then we have another list from previous questions. So one that just came in, Jim, I forwarded it to you as well. How safe would you say manufacturer refurbished hardware is from major companies like Apple and Hewlett Packard, Dell, etc.? Should we only buy new equipment or avoid backdoors, etc.?
So that's an interesting one, and there'll be a philosophical debate going on. This is like people that say Microsoft is a great software or Microsoft is not a good software. There are two sides of the coin. I know of companies that are selling and making and selling only new systems, and they have been discovered to have designed in backdoors, and they have the hardware that is open to future cybersecurity. So I wouldn't say just buying new systems guarantees you that you're going to be safe. Now, refurbishment, I think what we need to do is take a look at understanding what is the best known methods around cleaning these things out, and discover what is, the leading companies out there, and go to them, discover what they're doing to clean these up and try to enable, refurbished systems to be available. Now, going back into a discussion we had earlier, think of philanthropy. People are going to be donating computers to people that don't have access. And if we have suppliers that continue to be kind of, to create network adaptability and exposure, we have the opportunity when we see small businesses, minority businesses, diverse businesses that are growing with technology that might have been given to them, and we're going to network them in. So we can't just say, never go with a supplier or never go with a system that has been utilized. We have to find ways to ensure that they're clean. And it might take a little bit more to get there, but there are ways to do it. So nothing is guaranteed in life except a few things. And, whether I buy new or whether I buy used, I still have to be informed.
Absolutely. And I think that's a brilliant answer to this last question. Thank you so much for having us and for all your great questions and for your time. And we're wishing you a nice afternoon. Stay safe. And for you, your family.
Good
Thank
luck, folks, and stay safe.